Welcome. I'm Dr. Ken Piper. You're watching a series of teaching and learning discussions that I've been having, putting here on my website. We're focusing on the wonder of the human body, the amazing wonders within, the jaw-dropping awe of systems and integrations. This is part 3 of a 3-part series on the sensing systems of awareness. So this is how does our body work? How do we know where we are and what we do? How do we move? Part 1 was a focus on survival systems of seeing and smelling and hearing and tasting, and also on survival systems that we can feel more in our body, like hunger and thirst and inner temperature. In part 2, we explored the world. How do we feel the world with touch and pressure and vibration? How do we move in the world? So we talked about how we know where our body is and how joints, what position they're in, and how tight our muscles. And we talked about the inner ear, our main balance center. We talked about the cerebellum, which is an integrating center that has an amazing ability to simultaneously take messages from our bones and joints and muscles and tendons and ligaments and inner ear and eyes and ears and put it all together to give us smooth motion, equilibrium, and balance. Part 3, this section right now, is on inner senses, and there's 2 components I want to talk about: deep connective sensing and sensing that has more of a mind origination. Up to now, we have talked about sensing as a common stimulus from the outside world or the inside world, a receptor that picks up the energy of that stimulus, a change that occurs where that receptor turns the energy of the stimulus into human electrical energy, and that action potential, we call it, can now be transmitted up nerves, up the highways of our nervous system to central brain processing, integrating centers, and then we perceive it. So we don't see in our eyes, they're just receptors, and the receptors project on the back part of our brain. We don't smell in our nose, they're just receptors there. We interpret and perceive smell and odor in an area called the temporal lobe, which is sort of on the side of the head inside. So all over our body are these receptors, and when you touch something, little receptors change the touch sensation, which is physical, turn it into human electricity, send it all the way up to the top of your brain. And if we touch something sharp like a pin, we have a system to save us pain by pulling back quickly. And there is also sensing systems deep in the body, because there are linings and coverings all through our system that you don't often talk about. So for instance, there is a covering over the brain. There's actually 2 coverings. There's a really thin, almost clear covering over the brain structure called the arachnoid membrane. And then there's a thicker, heavier covering that's over the brain on that most outside part, which is called the meninges, or the meningeal covering. So when an infection gets into the nervous system, it will tend to inflame the outer covering, and we call that meningitis. When a brain hemorrhage occurs, and it's underneath the arachnoid level where the little blood vessels are, a subarachnoid bleed will cut into the brain, and that's the bad kind. Now, interestingly, if you bump your head badly and damage the blood vessels in the bone, inside bone of the skull, the blood may collect on top of the meningeal layer, which is also called the dura. And in that case, you press in on the brain, it's called a subdural hematoma, but you don't cut into it. So these coverings and surface membranes have tremendous importance. The spinal cord is covered with a membrane. The heart has a sac around it called the pericardium, a sac of fibrous tissue. The heart is really a pump inside this sac, and there's a little fluid around the heart so that it can move and beat smoothly. Infection, inflammation that gets into that heart sac is called pericarditis. Our intestinal organs have inner coverings. I'll show you a picture here of the heart covering, which is this pericardium. On the left is what it looks like. On the right, you can see that there is a buildup of fluid caused by infection. And if that fluid builds up too much pressure, it will actually squeeze in on the heart and cause big trouble. The membrane coverings and linings of the intestines are all through our abdomen. The liver, all the intestines, everything inside our body cavity is wrapped with a lining called the peritoneum. Now, the interesting thing is in the brain, the meningeal covering, the heart, the pericardial covering, and the intestine, the peritoneal covering. If any of those membranes are infected, inflamed, or irritated, they have tremendously rich pain receptors. And if an appendix ruptures and the pus pours out, a condition occurs called peritonitis. I told you about pericarditis, meningitis. These are very painful inflammatory conditions because these membranes are extremely sensitive. The bones also have a covering over them. It's called the periosteum. And one of the reasons a bone fracture hurts so much, and you can see the periosteum, that's that yellow membrane that's been cut back. You can see how stuck it is to the bone surface. It's a thick covering around the bone. So a broken bone tears that periosteum, extremely painful. An infection that gets down into the bone, extremely painful. It's called osteomyelitis. So these covering sensation systems kind of get talked about when there's trouble. There's another one, by the way, that's on the inner lining of your chest and on the outer surface of your lung. And we call those the pleural membranes. And if you get a nasty little virus, pneumonia, and it breaks through into that pleural area, a pain process develops called pleurisy. And pleurisy is terribly painful. It used to be called the devil's grip, because with every breath you would feel this knife of pain grabbing you right where the two surfaces were rubbing together. Now, I said besides these internal connective sensing systems, we also have mind-originated sensing systems, and they're a little different because they really don't have a specific place. On the brain, the pink is where our visual perception is located. The yellow is where our sensations from arms and legs go. Green is where taste and hearing go. That purple area is the cerebellum that illuminates all these phenomenal impulses, puts them together, and controls our movement and balance. We have other mind-originated senses that seem to come from no single receptor and no single part of the brain, but are built into the dynamics of brain integration and function. For instance, there's a mind-originated sense of time. And you, I'm sure, are aware of folks who have strong senses in time and others who don't. So if right now I took a stopwatch and said, okay, tell me when 60 seconds are up, go. I'm not going to do it, but if we did that, there's some of you watching who would be able to say stop within a second of 60 seconds. And there are many of us who would say stop when it was only 35, or stop when it was 75. So the sensing of time is important, and you know, our lives are an inward spiral of all kinds of dynamics moving toward a more common center, and time is on that loop. Long ago, time was important. If you go back fairly far, but not that far, 15, 20,000 years, 10,000 years, what really was important in time is to know when spring started. If you could figure out when spring was going to start, you could put in your seeds. Wait too long, you wouldn't get a good harvest. It would freeze over. Do it too early, frosts and too much rain might wash it out. So around the world in every culture, there are time machines that are designed to show a light passing through some solid structures, illuminating a spot in a way that they know, okay, this is the first day of spring based on where the sun is and how high. We have mind-originated senses of premonition and imagination. We've all had moments when we just knew something was going to happen. All of a sudden you just sense something and the phone rings and it's that person you were thinking of. Imagination can be a sudden event where something senses and pulls together that makes sense. We don't know where this comes from. We do know that relaxation is more universal. There's a sense of relaxation that tends to come in nature. There's something about the ground that's very important for us, being grounded, being touched with the earth and by the earth, being in nature. There is a sense of relaxation around water. Still water is a profoundly relaxing experience. We want to sit by the pond. We want to sit and watch the lake, walk with bare feet, lay in the grass. These are all built-in systems, sensing systems that in terms of past survival provided deep rest to take on the challenges of the next day. Most all of us will respond to this. There's a relaxing sense of inner peace with symmetry, with a sense of alignment. And most all humans, although we can't verbalize it, this is something special. Relaxation has its own kind of industry. There are relaxation techniques. I just listed about 25 of them here. But interestingly, relaxation techniques, humor, music, meditation, powerful. There's body techniques for relaxation, Tai Chi, Qigong, massage, letting people touch your body, moving your body. And then there's spirit techniques that have us feel and express gratitude. Prayer is another powerful way in a spirit technique to provide relaxation. And the last mind-oriented sense is that of wonder. So there's no one listening and watching this humble little talk who would not experience wonder standing on the edge of a mountain and looking down. There's something about the majesty, the sky, the earth, the water connected, that just, we sense that somewhere deep inside that has nothing to do with outer receptors. This is also an expression of wonder. All humans are drawn to waterfalls. I took 7 grandkids to Seattle, and we walked 3 miles to see Franklin Falls, which was 70 feet tall and a nice waterfall, but wasn't like this waterfall. We think that in terms of evolution and survival, the presence of a waterfall meant 2 things. One, it meant fresh water, because you don't have waterfalls from seawater. So a waterfall meant fresh water, and that meant life. And usually above a waterfall is a big river or a lake, which would mean fish and food and safety and a place to get solid for a while in a world where water was really important. Another and last bit of evidence that we're born with a sense of wonder is this, that every small child, given a pile of dirt, will spend an hour touching, eating, moving, rolling, sliding, sticking his feet in, sticking his fingers in. Every child wants to pick the dandelions, roll in the grass. They are built in to notice actively, to be aware, to be present, and to experience the wonder. So we finished part 3. I hope you'd enjoyed these 3 discussions on sensing our awareness. This is part of a Wonder of the Human Body series, The Wonder Within. I appreciate your watching. I look forward to any comments you have, suggestions, ideas. I am email available on thewonderwithin@gmail.com. I look forward to speaking with you on other talks that will be posted on my website. There are some take-home points on this series of senses of awareness. If you look in my blog post, you will see a blog post with the same title, and it'll have just on one page kind of a focused written summary of things we've talked about. So with that, I will say thanks to you all, and till then.